But to sort of kick off the teaching today, I have a confession, which is maybe not the best way to start a message, but it's not bad. But I do have a confession. I like to do everything as quickly as possible. Is there anybody else like me? Like you have no chill, right? You're always going 100 miles an hour. That is absolutely me. I do everything as quickly as possible. I walk fast. Like one of the things I loathe the most is getting caught behind some tourists on the sidewalk, right? Is that not the worst thing? I like walking slow. I hate it. I talk fast. I drive fast. Anybody get caught behind a Waymo? Like I lose every fruit of the spirit when I'm behind a Waymo, and it's just not moving. I can't even honk at a Waymo because there's not a person in there. So, I drive fast. I eat fast. I don't know what it is. Like Jen, I think just said, yeah, over here, like. Have you ever, so if you're married, you know this, and if you're not yet married or you one day are married, you'll learn this, that when you get married, you realize there are some things that were normal to you that you thought everyone did, and then you get married and your partner's like, why do you do that, right? Why do you do the things that you do? Well, when we first got married, I didn't realize this, but I thought everyone did it, but I ate standing up. And that's because of my family. Like eating was a means of survival, not community or connection. Right? So we would eat standing up and we wouldn't really do like, what are you grateful for? How was your? No, we're eating and we're just like eating as fast as we can. Then I got married to Jenna and like we would have a meal and she did this weird thing. She sat down when she ate. And she sat down and she's like, how was your day? Asking me all these questions. And I'm like, why are you asking? I just want to eat. What are we doing here? We're just here to eat. And I realize I've got some problems. I eat fast. I try to do everything as quickly as possible. Does anyone else feel like your life is just constantly in this perpetual state of hurry? Where you have to be really intentional if you're going to slow down. I bet I'm not the only one that has felt that and struggles with that. And it doesn't help that we live in what feels like the fastest moment in human history, right? Like we live in a time in human history where it's not easier to become a more patient person. Groceries can arrive in less than an hour. You can send an email across the world in a matter of seconds. And if we text somebody and you get that little talking bubble for more than 5 seconds, you wonder, is my friend still alive? Like, what is going on right now? And I've come to realize that it's hard, if not impossible, to be fully human when you are forever hurried. Dallas Willard, the late theologian and author, he said that hurry is the great enemy to spiritual formation. Not wrong theology, not enough time in prayer, not reading the Bible more deeply, although those things are all great. He thought one of the greatest enemies or threats to your spiritual formation was hurry. And we live in this time where we're trying to optimize everything, right? Optimizing our workflows, optimizing our strategies, optimizing our systems. And there's nothing wrong with that. I am all about efficiency. But there's just some things you can't optimize. Right? And I think like one of those things that you cannot optimize is the formation of your soul. Spiritual formation is a slow and lifelong work. I love what pastor and author Eugene Peterson said. He said, discipleship is long obedience in the same direction. Discipleship is a marathon, not a sprint. It's long obedience in the same direction. It's slow and it's arduous. And I've realized that not only is it impossible to become fully human while living fully hurried all the time, it's really hard, if not impossible, to become a more loving person if you are always living your life hurried. I've realized, and you know this, that it's hard to show up for those in your life, and it's hard for you to see the needs that are around you if you're constantly moving through your life each and every day at 100 miles an hour, which is exactly what a group of researchers from Princeton discovered in 1973. So apparently this hurried problem isn't new, it's an old problem. In 1973, they ran this really fascinating experiment. At Princeton, they recruited seminary students, which were these group of students looking to be future pastors. And in this study, they told the students, without telling them that they were like a part of this little experiment, they told them to walk across campus to give a short talk. And some of these students were given the assignment to speak on this parable that Jesus taught called the parable of the Good Samaritan. Now, if you're not familiar with that parable, the short of it is, it's a story Jesus tells about a person in need on the side of the road and people who skipped over that person, and one person, a Samaritan, who came to the aid of the person that was in need. And so some of these students were given the assignment to teach on slowing down and helping those who are in need. And the experiment wasn't about theology, it was about how time affects us. See, some students were told, you're early, take your time, you don't need to rush. Another group of students were told, you're on time, you're still good to go. And then another group of students were told that you're late. You need to go right now, you need to hurry and get there so you can teach on the Good Samaritan. And what they didn't know is that on the way, each student would pass a man slumped in a doorway, coughing and groaning and clearly in distress. And here's what happened at the end of the experiment. When students were in a hurry, only around 10% of those students stopped and helped the person who is obviously in need. And then the students that weren't rushed, what they found is 63% of those students stopped and helped the person who is in need. And what was interesting, the part that really got me, is that it actually didn't significantly matter whether they were about to teach on the Good Samaritan or not. Like, you actually had people that on their mind, they were like, I need to go and teach a message on how we need to love people who are in need. And then they skipped over the person in their path that was in need. Apparently, the difference between compassion and indifference wasn't character, it was speed. That we tend to think love is mainly about sincerity, but what this study showed us is love is also about the pace at which we live our lives. John Ortberg, he said this, he said, love and hurry are fundamentally incompatible. Love always takes time, and time is the one thing hurried people don't have. That's a really challenging quote for people like me. Maybe it challenges you as well. It reminds me of the passage in 1 Corinthians 13. If you don't know that right off the top of your head, that's fine, but you've probably heard it at a wedding or two. It's this passage where Paul defines what love actually is, and I always find it so interesting that when Paul is trying to paint for us a picture, like this is what love is, the very first characteristic, and remember, he could have chose any characteristic, but the first one he started with when defining love is that love is patient. Isn't that interesting? Like, love is patient, not love is impressive or efficient or productive or even passionate. He says the first thing you need to know about love is patient, which means the very first characteristic of love is connected to our pace. I would argue today you will never love well if you never learn how to slow down. And I bet there's a part of you, I bet in all of our hearts, even if we disagree on many things, I bet we agree on this, that we need to know and learn how to love better. Like, the world needs more people that love well. So how do we do that in a world that is constantly in a hurry? And that brings us to Acts chapter 3. Acts chapter 3, you have two ordinary followers of Jesus, and they are on their way to pray. Right? They're on their way to do something spiritual, something important, something that was scheduled. They have somewhere to be, and then they encounter a man who has spent his entire life sitting at a gate because he was paralyzed. And in that moment, their pace determines everything. Will they speed past the man in need, or will they slow down and love well? And the question I want to invite us to consider today, to wrestle with this morning is, I wonder what would change in your life, what could be possible even in San Francisco, if we as a community chose to move at the speed of love. Because the speed of love is much slower than you probably want to go. The speed of love causes us to pause, to slow down, to take in what's going on around us. What would happen, what could happen in us and through us if we decided today, hey, we're going to begin to move at the speed of love? What would you notice? Who would you see? And what things that you might have originally thought were interruptions would become invitations into something bigger in your life? Because in Acts chapter 3, it shows us that living on mission will require living at a different speed. Acts 3 shows us that love will require us to practice these four movements today. All my linear note-taking people in the room, you're going to love this. Here's the 4 points today, right up front. It is pause, look, give, lift. If we're going to move at the speed of love, then love will invite us to pause, to look, to give, and to lift. And today I want to propose that maybe just maybe the most spiritual thing that you can do this week is slow down long enough to love the person right in front of you. I'm not advising that you shouldn't pray or read your Bible or any of that. Those are spiritual things as well. But I think one of the things we forget the easiest in the world we live in is the art of slowing down. And I believe it's one of the most spiritual practices that we can do. So let's look at Acts chapter 3, verse 1 through 10. It starts here. It says this: Peter and John went to the temple one afternoon to take part in the 3:00 prayer service. As they approached the temple, a man lame from birth was being carried in. Each day he was put beside the temple gate, the one called the Beautiful Gate, so he could beg from the people going into the temple. When he saw Peter and John about to enter, he asked them for some money. Peter and John looked at him intently, and Peter said, "Look at us." The lame man looked at them eagerly, expecting some money. But Peter said, "I don't have any silver or gold for you, but I'll give you what I have. In the name of Jesus Christ the Nazarene, get up and walk." And then Peter took the lame man by the right hand and helped him up. And as he did, the man's feet and ankles were instantly healed and strengthened. He jumped up, stood on his feet, and began to walk. Then walking and leaping and praising God, he went into the temple with them. All the people saw him walking and heard him praising God. When they realized he was the lame beggar they had seen so often at the Beautiful Gate, they were absolutely astounded. How do we move at the speed of love? We're going to need to pause. We're going to need to look. We're going to need to give, and then we're going to need to lift. Let's talk about the first thing. First, we've got to pause. Like, if we're going to move at the speed of love, then we are going to need to learn the art of pausing. Mission begins when you interrupt your hurry. The story starts with two ordinary disciples really doing something faithful, something good even, right? They're going to the temple to pray. And this was a normal rhythm in Jewish life. There were set times of prayer. And so they were on their way to do something spiritual and good. And I want to highlight that. It's not like they were hurrying towards something evil or hurrying towards something broken or hurrying towards something that's destructive. They were hurrying towards something that was good and meaningful and purposeful. And the reason I highlight that is because it's not like any of you are hurrying towards evil things as well. But the battle is not so much that we get distracted with evil things as much as we can get distracted with good things and we miss the ultimate things that are in front of us. That we get distracted with things that are meaningful and good and purposeful. Like we can explain, that's why I didn't pause, because I'm doing this. And yet we miss what God is wanting to do in front of us. See, the disciples, they're moving towards the temple to go and pray. And right there at the entrance, Luke tells us in verse 2 that a man who was lame from birth was being carried to the temple gate called the Beautiful Gate. This man, he didn't just have a bad week or a bad month or even a bad year. He's had kind of a bad life. He's being carried. He's placed at this gate called Beautiful every single day. Begging near the temple, it was strategic, right? Worshipers would come to pray and they would give to the poor, seen as a righteous act. High traffic meant higher odds for a higher return. And this gate is called Beautiful, which is sort of ironic because this man's life had been anything but beautiful. And here's the tension that if you're walking with purpose towards something important, a person, if we're honest, can begin to feel like an interruption. Like if we're not careful, we might have this divine moment sitting in front of us, but sometimes those divine moments will show up dressed up as interruptions. And in Acts 3, the interruption is the assignment. Living on mission. It started with the disciples' willingness to pause. I mean, they could have been like, hey, we'll talk to you later, but we got to go pray. We're going to the temple. It's really spiritual. It's really important that we're there. And you know what? We weren't prepared for you right now, so we're just going to go pray. And you know what? Probably no one would judge them because of it. And yet they were willing to pause. And as they paused, what first looked like an interruption became an invitation into something beautiful. And so the first thing that moving at the pace of love invites us to do is to pause. To pause and look around and maybe even have like a holy curiosity. I wonder if this interruption is God inviting me into something right now. I wonder if God is interrupting me because there's a bigger story unfolding that I have yet to see. One thing is for sure, you will never know if you never slow down. You will never know if you never learn the art of pausing. So if you want to move at the speed of love, you got to first be willing to pause, but then you got to look. You got to look. Luke says the man asked them for money, and then Peter, he does something surprising. In verse 4, it says, Peter and John looked at him intently, and then Peter says, look at us. Now, this is not Peter trying to be like the main character. Like, do you know who I am? Like, that's not what Peter's doing right now. But really, Peter is refusing to let this man remain invisible. The man spent his life being overlooked. So one of the first things Peter does is he says, I see you. I see you. You know, people have treated this man as a problem to be avoided, but Peter here, because he's moving at the speed of love, he says, you're not a problem to be avoided. You're not a project to be fixed. You are a person to be loved. And I want to encourage us all this morning to know that as long as we look at people as projects to be fixed or problems to be avoided, we'll never be able to move at the speed of love that Jesus invites us to move in rhythm with. You see, Jesus invites us to look at all people, not just those who are easy to love, not just those that you understand, not just those that you know their story. He invites us to see all people not as projects, not as problems, but as people to be loved. Why? Because God loves all people. And so if we're going to move at the speed of love, it's not just pausing, but it's actually giving our attention to somebody else. I love what philosopher Simon Weil, he says, attention is the rarest and purest form of generosity. Doesn't it feel like a gift when someone gives you their undivided attention? Doesn't it feel like you are loved in a deep way when somebody is present with you and you can tell they're not anywhere else? But isn't it the most frustrating and discouraging thing when you are talking to someone and you can tell they are everywhere except with you in that moment? Or when you're having a conversation with you, you see their eyes shifting everywhere? Or you can tell they're thinking about their response before you've even finished your sentence? There's something about giving our undivided attention that is actually a gift of generosity to those that we are looking at. See, before Peter offers healing, he offers dignity. Before he gives a solution, he gives his presence. And if we're honest, this is where I think a lot of mission breaks down. We think love starts with answers. We think love starts with solutions. All my married people in the room, you know, have you ever had a moment with your spouse where they're just venting and then you give them the perfect solution? You give them like a PowerPoint plan of how to fix their problem. And they're like, that's not what I was asking for or needed at all. It's not the time to, elbow your spouse if that's the case. But I mean, I've been there, right? Like I'm a fixer by nature. When Jenna brings a problem, I want to fix the problem. But I've had many conversations with Jenna where she goes, what I just need is your attention. What I just need is to know that you see me and understand the story I'm sharing with you. This is what Philippians chapter 2, verse 4, Paul, he invites us into. He says, don't look out only for your own interests, but take an interest in others too. Right, he's saying, don't just look to your own interests, but look to the interests and needs of others as well. And how countercultural is this, right? We live in a world where everyone's trying to be interesting. Like, I'm trying to be interesting on social media. I'm trying to be the most interesting in my work. I'm trying to be most interesting in my circle or my community. But Paul actually invites us, don't make your aim to be interesting. Make your aim to be interested in other people. Look to the needs of those around you. And then we get in Acts chapter 3, verse 5. It says, the lame man looked at them eagerly, expecting some money. This man, he had been living as a beggar so long that he had come to just expect something small, the bare minimum, because that's what life had trained him to expect. And what I love is that Peter is about to give him more than he expects. Which is a side note here, church. I think the church should be known not for giving people what they expect, but giving them better. Like, we should be known as a community that always gives people more than they ever anticipated, more than they ever expected, which leads us into the third movement if we're going to move at the speed of love, and that is that we got to give. You got to pause, you got to look, and then you got to give. And here's what Peter says, and this part's really, really important. This part is so important for some of us that feel overwhelmed by the needs of our world. Have you ever felt that way? Here's what Peter says. He says, I don't have any silver or gold for you. First, I love Peter's honesty, right? He doesn't fake what he doesn't have. He doesn't posture. He doesn't overpromise. He doesn't virtue signal. Here's what some of us need to hear. So many people don't give anything at all because they're focused on what they don't have. Right? Peter, he goes like, I don't have silver or gold that you're looking for. I don't have that today. And some of us, I think we stop with what we don't have, and it stops us from serving or offering anything at all. I don't have enough money, so I won't give. I don't have the right words, so I guess I won't say anything. I don't have a lot of time, so I won't stop. I don't feel qualified, so I won't engage. But Peter doesn't stop with what he doesn't have, and you shouldn't stop with what you don't have either. He says this, I don't have silver or gold, but in verse 6 he says, but I'll give you what I have. I'll give you what I have. See, living on mission is not giving what you don't have. God doesn't invite you to give what you don't have, but living on mission is offering what you do have. Like, what's in your hand? What do you have to give? I think about Allison, even though she hates being in the spotlight. Sorry, I'm going to do it one more time, Allison. But like we had this need in our church for creating a student ministry space. She's never been a youth pastor. She doesn't necessarily have the credentials or anything like that. And you were nervous about that at the beginning. But what you did have was some time. What you did have was some skills to organize and administrate and to mobilize people. And she said, you know what, I don't maybe have this, but I'm not going to let what I don't have stop me from using what I do have. So I'm going to use what I do have and trust that God will do something with it. And now look, an entire ministry has started because of that single act of faithfulness. To say, I'm going to open my hands and give what I have. And then Peter, he says the next line that turns this entire moment. He says in verse 6, he says, in the name of Jesus Christ, the Nazarene, get up and walk. And it's that phrase, Jesus the Nazarene. Yeah, Nazareth, if you don't know, Nazareth was not impressive. No one was like, where are you going on the weekend? Nazareth. Like, no one goes to Nazareth for vacation or on a trip or anything like that. It was small. It was overlooked. It was the kind of place that people dismissed. If Jerusalem was San Francisco, Nazareth was Daly City. Are you with me? And if you live in Daly City, my bad. But, I mean, let's be real, all right? All right, let's just be honest. But, in fact, the Gospels in John chapter 1, verse 14, there was somebody that asked, can anything good come from Nazareth? And of course, if you know the Jesus story, then you know history tells us yes. God can and does the most world-changing work through some of the most underestimated people and places. See, Jesus' story is the story of a man who came from nothing. No platform, no privilege, no power, no elite background, no credentials, and he did something that changed the world. And so Peter, he's going like, we stand on the story of Jesus, and this story began in the most unexpected ways and in the most unexpected places, and it informed everything at which how they lived their lives. You see, the Jesus story convinced them not to underestimate what God can do through what you maybe have labeled as insignificant. It reminds me of the story of a moment between Moses and God. Maybe you're familiar with the story. God calls Moses to lead the nation of Israel out of slavery in Egypt. And Moses, like any of us would, he goes, you got the wrong guy. Like, there's no way. I am not the kind of person who could lead an entire nation and could face off with the most powerful person on the planet in Egypt. And yet God goes, no, I got the right guy. And then God asks this question. It's really subtle. You maybe skipped over it, but he asked Moses, what's in your hand? In Exodus chapter 4, verse 2. Maybe you know the story. Moses had a shepherd's staff. And God says, what's in your hand? He goes, it's a shepherd's staff. It's a stick. It's nothing. Why are we talking about my staff? And then God says, throw it down on the ground. And then Moses, he had nothing to lose, so he throws it down on the ground, and the staff turns into a serpent. And then when he picks up the serpent became a staff. There's something in this moment that I believe marked Moses and should do the same for us, and that is that when we trust God with what's in our hand, when we trust God with the natural, God can do the super with it. That God can go above and beyond and do things with what we have that we never could do on our own. The question is, what's in your hand? And are you willing to open your hand and throw it to the ground and trust that God can do something with it? You see, God never moves through people who have the credentials. Jesus is the only perfect person. Every other person was a person in progress with a whole lot of problems like me, who had a whole lot of questions like I have, who have some things in their past they're still working on and working through, and yet God still worked in and through their lives. The question was always, can you trust me? Trust me with what I have, what you have, and see me do something supernatural with it. You see, if you're going to move at the speed of love, we got to be willing to pause. We got to allow ourselves to be interruptible, because those interruptions very well may be divine, but we also got to look. What are the needs around us? What are the struggles around us? But then we got to give. We got to look in our hands and not focus on what I don't have, but let's focus on what I do have. And how can I begin to trust God with what I do have to do something that I couldn't possibly have done on my own? And that leads to the fourth and final movement when we move at the speed of love, and that is to lift. To lift, which is what we see Acts chapter 3, verse 7, we see Peter do. It says, then Peter took the lame man by the right hand and he helped him up. Now, I love that detail because it's sort of personal. Like you get in the mindset of almost, I think, of this lame man. Like he didn't just jump up and believe that he was healed, right? Like Peter actually had to grab him by the hand and lift him up. You know, this is conjecture, I guess, but I wonder if there was something in the guy's head being like, what are you doing? I have not been able to walk for as long as I can remember. Now you're telling me to stand? Like, are you making fun of me? This isn't even possible. What are you talking about? Stand up and walk. And so what did Peter do? Peter grabs him by the hand and he pulls him up. Peter refused to allow this man to settle for his lowest moment when God was calling him to stand up in his highest calling. And I think we as followers of Jesus, we should be known for how we lift people up, not how we push people down. Come on, somebody. We have enough people in our culture who are pushing people down, but the church should be known how we grab the hands of the vulnerable, how we grab the hands of the weary, how we grab the hands of those who have settled for their lowest moment and we pull them up to their highest calling. That we say, I see something in you, even if you don't see it in yourself. We got to be one another's seeing eye humans that helps lead one another and walk with one another and pull one another up when we feel like we can't do it on our own. It's not just purposeful what Peter does, it's also really risky. Have you thought about that? Like, he is in a public place at the temple, there is a crowd, and he tells this man who's been paralyzed since birth, stand up and walk. That's risky. What if he doesn't walk? What if he doesn't stand up? I mean, he's putting his reputation on the line. Can I ask you, when was the last time you put your reputation on the line for the Lord? Like, when was the last time you stepped out in faith to the degree that you're like, if this doesn't work out, I'm going to look like a fool? I think we see faithful as like glamorous and amazing and jaw-dropping, and it is in the end. But you know, faithfulness looks like foolishness a lot of the times at first. I mean, tell me Noah didn't feel a little foolish. When God's like, build a boat, it's going to rain. It had never rained in the world up to that point. He's like, well, I don't even know what this is, but I'm going to be obedient. Abraham, God says, leave everything you've ever known. You're going to be the father of many generations, but you got to trust me, you got to leave. You got to take the hero's journey. You got to leave home and be transformed along the way. Yeah, faithfulness looks like foolishness at first. When was the last time you risked looking foolish for God? See, I believe that the same God who healed lame people from birth is the same God today, can do even greater things today. The question is, are we willing to even risk our rep? Are we ever willing to risk and look even a little foolish in the process? This is what Peter does. And then it says in Luke 7, as he did, the man's feet and ankles were instantly healed and strengthened. And the man responds like someone who's been waiting his whole life for this moment, right? He jumped up, stood on his feet. He began to walk, then walking and leaping and twerking and praising God like he was doing it all. I think he was just like out of his mind excited. And he went into the temple with them. All the people saw him walking in and hearing him praise God. And here's the most powerful line to me. It moves me every time I read it. He went into the temple with them. He doesn't just get healed. He now gets included. He gets included. He lived at the gate, at the threshold. He was on the outside looking in. And now he's walking in with everyone praising God. He's experiencing community, probably in a way he's never experienced before. And then in verse 9, it says, all the people saw him walking and heard him praising God. The overlooked becomes undeniable. That's what happens when the church refuses to treat people like projects to be fixed or problems to be avoided. And instead, the church is known as a community that treats all people like people to be loved. See, Elie Wiesel, she famously said this. She said, the opposite of love is not hate, it's indifference. The opposite of love is not hate, it is indifference. And Acts chapter 3 is this moment where it's almost like the church says, we will be different by refusing to be indifferent. Like, we are not going to be known for walking by those who are hurting, who are vulnerable, who are unable to stand on their own. We are going to pause. We're going to look. We're going to give. We're going to lift. We're going to move slowly, because that is what love beckons us to do, to move slowly and allow God to interrupt us so he can invite us into something beautiful. And you know, I think in today's world where there's so many breaking headlines, so much bad news, so many reasons to become indifferent and apathetic, you know what would really be incredible? Is a church that refuses to do any of that. A church that refuses to just move in rhythm and at the speed of the world, but instead decides to rebel against hurry and say, no, we're going to move at the speed of love. We're going to pause. We're going to look. We're going to give. We're going to lift. We're going to go to our work and we're going to pause and we're going to look and we're going to give and we're going to lift. We're going to walk through our neighborhoods on Chestnut Street on a beautiful sunny Sunday, and we're going to pause and we're going to look and we're going to give and we're going to lift. We're going to be present. We're going to move slowly. We're going to be interested instead of striving to be interesting. Because this is what Jesus beckons us to do. So what does this look like? Let me give you 3 practical things, then we'll go into a time of reflection. Just practical steps that all of us can take. The first is this. This week, I want to invite you to slow down. I want to invite you to slow down. And I mean, like, literally, slow down. How do you do this? You got to practice it if you're anything like me. So here's a couple ways to practice slowing down. When you're at the grocery store and you're looking for the shortest line, I want you to look for the longest line. And there's going to be part of you that dies on the inside a little bit as you do that, right? But we're going to practice. We're going to train our soul that slow is not bad. You never know what we might see now that we slow down. Maybe it's like you typically go to the fastest lane of traffic. We're going to go, you know, if there's one of those yellow tourist car things, we're going to go right behind it the entire time. And we're going to pray a lot. Like, what does it look like to slow down? But it's not just about slowing down. It's also slowing down and saying, God, help me to see what I might have always been missing. Help me to see what's in front of me that you have seen, that you've been aware of, but I've just been tunnel vision and missed it. And that goes to the second thing, and that is open your eyes. And what I want to invite you to do this week is maybe here's the thing, when you pray, God, open my eyes to see what you see, you're going to start seeing some things. So don't pray it if you don't mean it. But if you mean it, God, help me to see what you see, you're going to see some things. And maybe it's walking down the street and you're going to see that houseless brother or sister in their neighborhood that you always overlooked, always walked by. And maybe this time God's going to say, no, we're going to slow down today. We're going to pause, we're going to look, we're going to give, we're going to lift. Maybe it's a coworker. Maybe it's a coworker that you've always done work with, you've been in the same room, but you never got to know them at all. And this time you're going to actually slow down and get to know their story. Who's maybe one person that you can become interested in this week that you might have otherwise passed when you're moving hurriedly through your life? The last is this: give what you can. We're going to slow down. We're going to open our eyes. Who's that one person? And then we're going to give what you can. Friend, I want to invite you, quit disqualifying yourself because of what you don't have. Offer what you do have. Some of you are like, I don't have all the answers, but I have attention. I'll give you my attention. I'll give you some time. Maybe I'll give you a prayer. Maybe somebody's like, I just need a meal. Great, I'll give you a meal. I can do that. Maybe it's just a connection. Maybe it's just eye contact, somebody feeling seen for the first time in a long time. Maybe it's just offering practical help. But give what you can. That's the invitation today. How do we begin to move at the speed of love? We're going to slow down intentionally. We're going to open our eyes and let's look for one person, and then we're going to give what we can to that one person. Because I get it, in this world, there's so many needs, so many causes, so many problems, and it can feel so overwhelming. But I heard one pastor say, do for one that you wish you could do for everyone. And that's what I want to invite you to do this week. Do for one that you wish you could do for everyone. As you pause and slow down and you give and then you lift. Yeah, when we move at the speed of love, you will be interrupted, but you'll also be invited into a bunch of divine moments each and every day. And I don't know about you, but I want to experience those moments. I don't want to let them pass me by. Can we pray?